In the name of Allah, the Beneficent and the Most Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. I greet you, beloved brothers and sisters, in the greeting words of peace. We say it in the ancient tongue of Arabic, Assalamu alaikum. Those words, Assalamu alaikum, simply means peace be unto you. And that is the spirit I stand here before you today, in the spirit of peace, because we recognize the time and what must be done. We recognize the time in which we are living, particularly we, the black people, whether we find ourselves in Africa or in the diaspora. We should understand this is the time that has been prophesied for our rise. We who went through a systematic brutality at the hands of the Europeans, at the hands of the Americans, and at the hands of the Caucasian white men in particular. So we recognize that this is the time that the Lord has prophesied, because if you read in Genesis 15 verse 13, where God promised or assured Abraham and said, Abraham, know for a surety that your seed will be in a foreign land amongst a strange people. They will afflict them 400 years, but at the end of that time I will come, and I shall judge that nation whom they shall serve. All right? And they will come out with great substance. And basically, that's talking about our rise through these 400 years of slavery. After, at the end of that time, we will come out with great substance, basically with great understanding and great knowledge of our God. And today, God said He is in present today. And basically, as per the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as taught by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we want to address black people all over the world to have this common understanding of our rise, to have this common awareness and common consciousness of our people, to understand that this is the time that we have to rise today. This is the time that we have to clean ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and get into power, basically, so that we can start administering freedom, justice, equality, and most of all, peace to the human family. Because if it's left to the Western powers, the so-called Western powers that be, the European powers that be, if it's left to those people, we are going to wait for eternity, and it's never going to happen where we're going to have this world, a peaceful world. It's never going to happen. You see what they are doing now in Russia, basically using Ukraine as a means of attack to Russia. But you know, Russia has proven to be a little bit more resilient. So we need to understand, basically, where do we start as a people? Because we're still living in a system where we are dominated, be it militarily, be it economically. We as the black people of this earth, we are dominated. And I'm saying that it is time that we realize that only our unity, nothing else, only our unity is going to get us somewhere. Only our unity will make us sort of have this defensive posture against our common enemy. Because if we fail to unite, we will forever remain subjugated. We will forever remain under the control and under the yoke and under the hegemony of white supremacy if we do not unite. So today is the day that we need to understand, how do we unite? Where do we stand in terms of our unity? Okay? Africa has been basically dismantled into little kingdoms that makes it feasible for the white men to control us through what we called foreign policies, because he enact foreign policies, and he's got what they called ambassadors and all these people who basically are just like spies. Ambassadors are nothing but spies in our land, who basically then look at what we do. They come and analyze our weakness. They look at all our weakness, and then they report back to their masters, and then they can plan to make sure that we continue, or they continue subjugating us. So that is what we need to understand, that these so-called ambassadors, they are nothing but ambassadors from the West. They are simply spies. So when it comes to our unity, beloved, I shared a video recently where I was talking about the unity of Africa, where we have to start somewhere. And I said we in the southern region, in the southern African region, we need to start by uniting the so-called Sadc communities or Sadc countries. We need to start there. That's where we need to start and say, as of today, or as of whatever day we are going to choose, Sadc is going to be one common country. How are we going to do that? We can decide and say, as of today, Sadc is going to use the same currency universally. Okay, now what are the countries that are in Sadc? Well, we have Namibia, okay, we have South Africa, we have Angola, we have Zimbabwe, we have Zambia, we've got Lesotho, we've got Swaziland, we've got I think Malawi. I've mentioned Malawi, and we've got Botswana. We've got so many countries, all the way to Madagascar, all these countries, Seychelles, and all these countries. Basically, we are a community, all right? And what we have in common is the fact that we are all living under the yoke of white supremacy, where we are controlled from United States of America, from Washington, D.C. Our head of states are controlled and basically at the mercy, of this so-called white liberals or white supremacists, And we need to understand that if we don't start the unity now in the Southern African region, it's going to make it easier for the enemy to infiltrate, just like he's trying to infiltrate now. You've seen how the enemy has given out what you call warnings. The enemy gave out warnings where he said that the South African government is at one night away or few days away from a terrorist attacks. And we know the enemy, he's the one plotting all these terrorist attacks. He is basically the one funding these people, these terrorists. He's the one funding them. He's the one equipping them with money. He's the one giving them guns. He's the one doing all these things. And then he sends out a warning, so to say, that we told you, But he's the one planning it all from the shadows. So we know the enemy. And if we don't start now uniting and realizing ourselves as brothers and sisters, whether we are in South Africa, whether we are in Namibia, whether we are in Botswana, as long as we, with this black color, we need to understand that we are basically brothers and sisters. We are a family. We are a community. And nothing should stop us from mingling and getting to know one another. Nothing should stop us. These so-called borders, these are just artificial borders. These are artificial borders that the enemy has put up, and as I've said, he has put them up to make it easier for him to control us, because when we are divided, we are weak. But when we are united, we are strong. Right? That's why we stand when we are united, and that's why we fall when we are divided. So the enemy knew exactly what he was doing in 1884 or in 1885 when he came and dismantled and drew all these borders. And by the way, when he was drawing these borders, he was killing our brothers and sisters through genocidal means and all these things. So we understand the enemy. We understood the enemy's purpose for dividing us. So these borders should not even exist whatsoever. I should be able to travel throughout the Sadc region using my passport, using my ID. Okay? I should be able to travel. And I've said that we should even be prepared to go further and say the money that they use in Botswana, the pula, should be able to come and buy in Namibia. The banks in Namibia must accept it just as much as the banks in Botswana must accept the Namibian dollar. All right? The South African rand is purchasing in Namibia, but I heard recently that there are certain parts in South Africa where the Namibian dollar cannot purchase goods. But that's ridiculous, because if the Namibian dollar is equal to the South African rand, one Namibian dollar is equal to one South African rand, why should then a Namibian dollar not purchase anywhere in South Africa? Why is it only limited places that the Namibian dollar can purchase in South Africa? And that's because that is the enemy's orchestration. He is the one that's running this whole thing up, right? And obviously we know that the enemy has puppets as well among us. There are always Judas Iscariots. There are always Judas Iscariots even among us. Okay? And we understand, we say, look, we need to do away with this, what I sometimes referred, naive mentality of us as black people, where we contribute and we take part in our own destruction. We take part in our own subjugation to be cornered. We are the ones taking part in all these things. And I'm saying, let the Namibian dollar purchase everywhere and anywhere in the Sadc region. We'll start with the Sadc region first, because we have to start somewhere. The Namibian dollar will purchase anywhere, whether in Botswana. We don't need to exchange. We don't need to exchange the Namibian money to get pula when we go to Botswana. No, we can basically spend that same money. If it's $1, it's equal to one pula. It's simple. If it's one pula, it's equal to $1. If it's one kwanja, it's equal to $1 or one pula. Okay? There should be no difference and say, no, the pula is stronger than the dollar. No. Because we are one community. We are one country. So our money cannot be stronger somewhere and weaker somewhere or in another place. Then we are not being mathematically correct. If our money has to be stronger in Namibia, but then when we go in Angola, we are told that the money is weaker, then no. That is how we create chaos. Okay? Because all these things are as a result of being separated as black people. This is a result of being separated as black people. Okay? Where as soon as you throw the American dollar in Africa, anywhere in Africa, the American dollar, everybody wants to touch the American dollars. But nobody wants to deal with the money at home. What is wrong with us? Okay? So I'm saying, let the Namibian dollars, let the South African rand, let the Botswana pula, let the Zambian kwacha, let whatever currency we use be equal to 1 is equal to 1. 1 is equal to 1. Right? Wherever we are, that's number one. And we as the head of states, we as the presidents, we must set these precedents and send out this directive and say that our banks, all these local banks, all these commercial banks must be ready and must be prepared to accept whatever African currency it's brought in that bank. They should not say, okay, we cannot accept this because this is kwacha. No. Or we cannot accept this because this is a polar. No. It does not need to be exchanged. I must basically have all the various currencies in my wallet. And $1 is equal to $1. It's a directive. We start somewhere. What are the consequences? We don't care. As long as we are united, as long as we are traveling freely and communicating with our brothers and sisters, that's the purpose right there. Okay? If the enemy decides to sanction us because he is a master of sanctions, right? If the enemy decides to sanction Namibia because Namibia is doing that, is allowing all the currencies and all the currencies are equal to his currency, then he must be prepared to sanction South Africa. Then he must be prepared to sanction Botswana. Then he must be prepared to sanction Zambia. That is how we stand together. And we needed to do this yesterday. Many, many years ago, when the enemy decided he's going to sanction Zimbabwe, when Mugabe started asking for land reform and said that, no, you white farmers need to share some of the land with our people because, by the way, you've taken this land by force. So share some of the land with our people. And then the enemy, what the enemy decided, he decided to sanction Zimbabwe. And most of our presidents at the time, they were so afraid of the white men at the time that they decided to stand aside and watch how Zimbabwe was turned into chaos by the enemy. Zimbabwe was prevented from doing business with other countries. Other countries were prevented from doing business with Zimbabwe. So that's where the problem is, because Zimbabwe was on her own. None of the presidents were speaking for Mugabe or backing Mugabe up. None of the African head of states at the time. But this is a new day now. The white man's time to rule is actually up. He has no say in our affairs in Africa. Whatever we decide to do in Africa, we do not need permission from him. We do not need permission from Washington. We do not need permission from the British government. We do not need permission to do for ourselves what they have failed all these years to do for ourselves. Imagine these enemies, after subjugating us, after putting us through this system of white supremacy and white tyranny, after putting us in this system, they still failed to correct these mistakes. So because to them it was not mistakes, that's their nature. It was not mistakes. They did it. They knew exactly what they were doing when they slaughtered our forefathers. But yet they are still failing to pay reparation. They are still failing to give us decent amount of money so that we can fund our capital projects. Today we've got projects that we cannot run, that cannot get off the ground simply because we do not have money. But what is money? Money is not the effort that the engineers have to put in place. If the engineers can put in the effort, if the quantity surveyors and the land surveyors are there, who are you to tell us that we cannot do the job as a result of lack of money? Okay, because this is what the enemy has always done. He has always been holding money away, so that even today when we are in power, as a result of lack of money, we are unable to do things. Simply because money is holding us back. But that should not be the case. Okay, they have been, because they have controlled all the mines, they have been shipping out all the money, they have been shipping out all the mineral resources, and they have not established their manufacturing plants in Namibia or in Africa, or in Zimbabwe or in Botswana. They establish it there in their countries, taking the raw materials from Africa, going to manufacture finished products in what? In Britain or in Europe. Okay, so this is the hypocrisy that we need to understand, and nobody has the right to preach about human rights and human rights this whenever we deal decisively with these hypocrites and these Judas Iscariots, because there are a lot of Judas Iscariots in our midst, and we need to get rid of all those Judas Iscariots that are basically preventing the unity of Africa. We need to get rid of this Judas Iscariot, and we don't need the enemy telling us about human rights. Because what do you think they do with their Judas Iscariots that side? So today we need to unite. Today we need to make our currency. It starts with money, because this is war. This is an economical war. Once then we establish that our dollars, our pullers are equal to one another, then we have a benchmark. Then it means if a truck driver is transporting goods from Botswana, bringing them into Namibia, he does not need to waste time and go stand in the bank to get Namibian dollars because he knows he's coming to Namibia. No, he basically load up his truck and get onto the journey and come. Because when he comes to Namibia, we will accept one pula is equal to 1 Namibian dollar. 100 pula is equal to 100 Namibian dollar. Equal to when truck drivers drive from Namibia going to Botswana, they don't need to waste time in the banks asking for pulas. No, because 1 Namibian dollar when you go to Botswana, it should be able to purchase whatever you need there. It's mathematics that we are talking about here. And today we need to apply mathematics to everything that we do. We need to apply mathematics to everything that we do. We need to apply even mathematics to our love. Because we don't love each other, we need to now to start loving each other mathematically now. Because we understand what has been done to us. We understand that we have lost the knowledge of ourselves. And today, most of our people are suffering from self-hate. Most of our people don't love their fellow black people. That's where the enemy has gotten us. And we need to be mathematically correct to say, look, if 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, then you and I are equal to 1. Because we are one, by the way. We come from the same forefathers, by the way. Okay? So, this is where we need to start. This is our benchmark. So that at the end of the day, we have all this money together, we put it together and we say, oh, Sadc, you are actually worth, if we count all the money, you are actually worth, let's say 5 trillion, for example. Okay, 5 trillion or 6 or 10 trillion whatsoever has to be divided annually, each and every year. Okay, we can go to the drawing board and say, how much money do we have in Namibia? How much money do we have in Botswana? How much money do we have in South Africa? At the end of the day, we determine, okay, how much money do we have together? And then we say, okay, fine. Let us calculate the populations that we have so that we can distribute this money per GDP. So if we find that we've got $7 trillion, and then our population is, let's say, 500 million people. We divide that 7 trillion divided by the 500 million people, and then we have a certain amount of money per capita. And then we say, okay, per capita, if Namibia has 2.5 million citizens, then we multiply 2.5 million with whatever figure we got per capita, and then that's the money that Namibia is going to get for its national budget. Coming from that collective amount of money, we can even establish a Sadc bank right now. We don't need permission from anyone. That's why I keep saying, stop asking permission from your enemy. There's a reason why he's your enemy. He's never going to approve things that will benefit you. So stop asking permission from your enemy. Establish a bank right now where each of our countries must bank. Okay? The Namibian Development Bank, for example, or the Development Bank of Namibia, for example. I'm sure there's a Development Bank of South Africa. There's a Development Bank of Botswana. There's a Development Bank of Zambia. All right? So, whatever money there is, we put that money together and we share it equally amongst one another, knowing that the currencies that we work together should not be a hindering or should not be an obstacle to say, oh, but we have different currencies. How can we trade? No, we can trade by saying the currency is equal to one another. It's simple. It's very simple. And as I've said, we do not need permission from anyone, especially not from our former slave masters. Okay? So, beloved brothers and sisters, I really wanted to emphasize on these things. We need to start the unity, and especially the unity of Southern African countries needs to start right away. I don't even know what we are waiting for. Because if we are going to wait, the longer we wait to unite, the more chance we give to the enemy to infiltrate. Trust me, the more time we delay of our unity, the more time we buy for the enemy to buy, individuals and stuff like that, because the enemy is very good at bribing. He's very good at giving these brown envelopes that I refer to as bones. He comes with a bag full of bones, and then he knows that he will find his dog, So today we need to understand that the enemy has no strength, but we could allow the enemy to infiltrate. If we delay the unity, let us not delay the unity, please. Okay? Brothers and sisters, I want to greet you in the greeting words of peace as I have begun. We said in the ancient tongue of Arabic, Assalamu alaikum.